Welcome, everyone, to another episode of Duality Bites.
Duality Bites.
I, Asteria, am here once again with our good friend, Jay Ben. Good to see you again, Jay Ben.
It's good to be here again, Asteria.
Today is actually going to be a little bit different, at least from my point of view. Thus far, with Duality Bites, I try to keep things so that if you haven't listened to the podcast, you can probably still keep up. And this is actually going to be focused on the lore building of Jay Ben's character Lemma. And I think there are lessons to take for playing DAGGERHEART and TTRPGs generally, but there are going to be a lot of spoilers for Jay Ben's character. We've just released episode 7 of the first season of Queen of Daggers, Heart of Fire. And this will probably be best suited to people who have listened up through episode 7. If you don't care about spoilers at all and you think you're good at context clues, feel free to listen anyway. But if you feel lost, you're probably correct. If you're listening to this before you listen to episode 7.
Suggested for listeners of level 7 or above.
Yes, exactly. And episode 7 was a big one for Lemma, probably the biggest since. We had a big flashback for Lemma in episode 3 and kind of a companion flashback in episode 7. This is where we find out about Lemma's kindling, which a term you coined, Jay Ben, actually. You, in one of our session zeros, you threw out the word kindling when we were talking about poets getting their powers for the first time. And I hadn't come up with a word for that yet. And I said, brilliant, I'm stealing that. Kindling it is. You clearly don't remember.
I 100% forgot coming up with that, yeah.
It was a long time ago. It was probably a year ago.
Yeah.
Almost. But yeah, where I want to start us out is what you knew going into episode 7, because I think that might interest some listeners. Almost 100% of the podcast is improvised. Like with most actual play podcasts, there have been one or two things I've warned people about in advance. You know, episode 1, I think I told you all we're going to start at the Conjuries and you're going to go on a field trip. And that was all you knew. I believe I had warned David at the beginning of a session that he was going to have an intense flashback to the creation of Cosmone. And before this session, so at the end of episode 6, I had not warned you that you were going to see Lorelei. I had given you, I think, a quickie. By the way, the family was called the Vermeers. You invented during character creation the nature of Lemma's kindling, that Lemma had not totally intentionally or without premeditation brought someone back to life. And I think we worked out some of the details, that it was a young person. I don't even remember, and that it was a noble person.
Yeah. I think I feel like I gave you some kind of vague outlines that it needed to be like wicked family committed a murder.
Yes.
Are getting away with it. I find out and I'm instructed not to interfere. And then inadvertently do.
And we'll talk a little bit in a few minutes about the creation of the Elegists, which is all Jay Ben, wonderful addition to the world of Lacuna. But towards the middle end of episode 6, I sprung Laura Vermeer on you. You know, we had not discussed at all what had become of the person Lemma had revived. And then episode 6, surprise, here she is. And so I don't think, I doubt it would have come as a shock anyway that the following episode was going to be a flashback to that kindling. But I made sure anyway that was one of the only things that I've given like a week's notice on. I said, we're going to do the flashback to the kindling. I knew you would probably have text for the liturgy, the elegy, that you would want to make sure you had prepared. And that's the kind of thing that, I see no reason why you would have to improv that eulogy, that elegy, that liturgy. So I made sure we were on the same page about that. And I think that's literally the only thing we discussed going into 7.
I think that's right. Yeah. Maybe there was like a check-in about the exact circumstances or whether I had any preferences for them. But yeah. Basically, it was a heads up. Like, it was pretty obvious if it would have been something that I would have driven towards anyway.
Yeah. You already had it ready to go. Which did not surprise me, but it just seemed, work towards the results you want, generally speaking.
Yeah.
Hey, get your elegy ready, jackass.
Elegy's ready, idiots. Yeah, no, I think, and at the end of episode 6, I was surprised, and Lemma was surprised to see Lorelei. And at that point, it was very clear that this sort of set piece flashback was in the offing.
Yeah. And
needed to be. Like, you don't want to, at least me, I don't want to totally improv the kind of given circumstances of backstory. But appreciate having space to discover really organic, surprising moment-to-moment stuff, which I think is what happened.
Yeah, and I do want to emphasize that for the listener, just how much of that was improvised. But I also want to emphasize that you and I specifically, like, you're the person at the table that I have RP'd with the most before this podcast. Yeah. And you and I think there's table trust all around, but also I think you and I, we're the pair who probably know each other best in terms of RP and, creative style. And I think that kind of shows in the 2 parent scenes in particular, at least in terms of my comfort with improvising those very intimate scenes, intimate in the familial sense. I know for me, the flashbacks have been kind of the scariest thing to improvise. In episode 2, I intended to do a flashback scene to Ginny's kindling, and I simply chickened out. And, we narrate, I had her describe it instead, because just improvising a character's, you all create your family, your characters' families. And so for me to take the reins and tell you what happened and to play your parents, your grandparents, your family, it's intimidating. But that's the game. I didn't want to script out too much, because then that's no fun.
Yeah,
and I don't get better.
Think it's also really gratifying to present you with kind of a shape or a hue and then see where that ends up. And I've been, for what it's worth, I think you've been fantastic with all of these flashbacks.
Thank you.
But also when I've said, like, hey, here's this character and here's what they're like, there's like a vague picture in my head, and then you bring to it that I didn't anticipate, which is awesome. And also really useful, because that's what family is. It's these things that they are sort of familiar, but perform and act in ways that you don't expect. And you can't choose.
Actually,
you just get what you get.
Let's talk more about this. Carmela and Katie and I talked a little bit about the family stuff in Chicago. We haven't aired it yet, partially because it gets into further down the road season stuff. But I love to hear more about your experience, especially since you're the person I've done 2 parents with. And I don't remember, I think you gave me about as many clues to the parents as appear in the show.
Yeah.
The different attitudes towards silence and lament, the 2 parents, what those archetypes might be like. I'll let you talk before I say anything else.
Yeah, so what was the question?
I don't know, just what was it like to RP, sort of complex parental dynamics?
I mean, really, I think there's this larger aspect of Lemma that I sometimes find difficult to RP, because he's so like passive and watchful. And I think with his parents in those scenes, he's being very he's listening very intently, and he's responding very cooperatively, except for some key points. So one sensation I had during those scenes is just like, this voice in my head sort of saying, am I doing enough? And I think yes.
Yes.
And then also just this sensation of, oh, my attention is just fully engaged. Like, this is my character's whole world. This is literally being done purely for my benefit and enjoyment. Yeah. And like, I'm very urgently keyed into everything that's happening. Which is, I've never actually had, I mean, we have played a few campaigns together, and I don't think I've ever had the experience of like, we are fully like improvisationally RPing a backstory scene.
Yeah. I'm not sure. I'm not sure if I've done that in any campaign I've been in.
It's very cool. It's kind of scary.
And I realize there are several differences between the two scenes, but I think also structurally, the most recent scene, the kindling scene, Mother, you certainly had you knew the framework. You knew where it was headed. I think there's sort of the first half of it I drove, but you knew what the story was. You knew.
I knew the destination.
Yeah.
If not the journey.
Knew this was the story of you finding out that this person had been murdered by her family, being told not to do anything about it, and doing something about it that you had not known was possible in the world, much less by you.
Yeah.
The first scene, I think, probably I just threw at you completely open-ended. I don't know if you had any idea where it was going.
No, I think you asked me some questions like, is there a moment in Lemma's childhood when he and his family would have arrived at a location? What would that location have been? How old was he? What's he helping his parents with?
When I'm establishing the town.
Right, the town, but I'm just sort of answering instinctively questions that I had never actually thought about.
But so for the listener, in case you haven't memorized every moment of the podcast, Lemma and the characters hear this strange music. I don't know that I tell you what the music is before the flashback. I don't know that I even say this is the music of the Zephyr chord approaching.
No, I don't think...
There's music and there's rain, which I imagined you as players at least would associate with the Queen of Rain. And then I flash you back to when you were 11. I don't remember if I say at the beginning, you flash back to the last time you heard this music, or if I saved that to the end of the memory, and at the end, and then you're having this conversation with your father that is interrupted by the sound of this music, and then you found out. I probably should have looked that up before this. Doesn't matter.
I don't remember either. I do remember that there was this like really effective sense of disorientation.
Yeah, it probably doesn't matter that much in terms of, like, I doubt you were thinking of that the whole scene. Like, oh, this is
about... I better play this backstory optimally so that I get advantages.
But I'm remembering now, as we're talking about it, how different those scenes must have been for you compared to me, because I knew where the first scene was going and why we were doing it then, but you just had to roll with it.
Right. No, that's true. And I think in many ways, the second flashback, the flashback at Laura Vermeer's funeral, because I had given you the outline. I didn't know exactly how everything was going to happen, but I knew where it was going to end up, and I knew the beats. It's funny that the first beat was me saying, okay, I'm going to hide in the corner. You play two characters while I listen. But yeah, I think the sensation of being in both scenes was pretty different. The first scene was what is this? What's happening? What's going to happen next? And the second scene was like I submitted a spec script and you turned it into a movie. Kind of.
I love that.
Yeah. It was a very cool experience. I mean, and also just really satisfying dramatic improv. It's fun, folks. It's real fun. And on top of that, the added context of like it coming out of the conversation with Lorelei, which was so just emotionally intense.
Yeah, which hadn't prepped explicitly, and I think was just fun. It was just classic knowing the beats of a story.
Yeah. As we're talking about this, I think that was the part that felt the most unknown, right? Obviously, this like big set piece flashback, discovering a ton of stuff in the midst of it, but then like coming out of that and re-engaging in the present day conversation with Lorelei, which I didn't write. I wrote what happened. I didn't like come up with any ideas for, well, what does that mean for her? How does she react to it? So all of the impact of the story sketch that I came up with is just completely new to me.
And Lorelei's connection to other characters in the party, that came very late for me. That was not the plan the whole time.
Okay, interesting.
That was not the plan from before session 1.
Yeah. So, and I guess like David and I just came up with aligning concepts in certain ways.
Yeah, there's a lot about Orlean and the mysteries David left available in that character that lined up so well that I do look back and think I can't believe all this fell into my lap. It wasn't, oh, Jay Ben and David are both choosing fungal. I'm immediately going to figure out the connection between that.
Right.
I let myself figure that out more organically. I mean, death. Like I knew pretty early on that death-ishness. You were both very, he's like, I'm the son of undertakers, and we both have the death connection, but in a more specific sense, and especially having Lorelei be the person to reveal it.
Right.
And I hadn't thought about how that would set up the emotional stakes of the two of you, and especially with you initially avoiding her.
Right. Yeah. Also I mean, this was a theme for me, especially in the early stages of the season. But I'm constantly doing these Lemma choices of like, I'm gonna stay outside the group and observe everybody else, but stay silent and wait until everybody leaves before I have my scene. Which I every time it happened, I was like, is this the right choice? I don't know. But it ends up. Those who haven't listened to the episode, Orlean has this really wonderful conversation with Lorelei. Then he leaves, and I feel emboldened to go and talk to her myself. But it's a nice little trick of storytelling economy because you can just multi-purpose the same character.
I also feel like there's a little bit of narrative flirtation happening where it's like, oh, you're playing hard to get with this NPC? Well, maybe someone else will snatch her up and she'll become part of their story, Lemma. Like,
yeah.
Soren and the bear are going to go talk to Lorelei in the woods.
Yeah. You're not my only option.
Yeah, exactly. I could be in this story another way. I don't need you.
I have other offers for a prom date. Lemma's whole character concept and the concept of the elegists, I think, is another instance of this back and forth that we're talking about of, in the case of this flashback, I kind of gave you a sketch and you did in. Or I gave you the sketch of the parents and you filled in all this detail. In the case of Lemma and the elegists, we were having like one of our session zeros and you mentioned as a reference point the giver. I mentioned this in another Duality Bites, so sorry, listener.
It was during one of our one-on-one sessions.
Yeah. And
it's kind of I think before I knew the DAGGERHEART term touchstone. Like that's basically what that would have been. In describing sort of how poetry and the caudal ward and poets function. Yeah,
in the kind of fictional Pinterest board.
Yes.
And that reference point kind of crystallized so much of what I wanted to do. And it resolved into this idea of a group of people who were committed to the act of memorializing. I also wanted to do some writing in the context of playing this character, somewhat literally minded. I was like, oh, poets, cool. And that was my first impulse when you first started talking about doing this. So I wanted to do some liturgical stuff and some poetic stuff. And so those two forces combined to make the elegists, who were like traveling Puritan preachers meet monks, meet like Kohanim. I tried not to make them too literally any one cultural reference.
Yeah.
But yeah, you gave me a sketch, a vibe, and then the colors filled in my brain. So listener, it works both ways.
Yeah, that's kind of what I want to emphasize, is how much of this came from us before the campaign and during the campaign, from us throwing ideas and thoughts out to each other and building on that, which gave us a foundation to throw things out to each other in RP.
Yeah, and I don't think every campaign has to be like this one. Certainly.
Oh, no, certainly not.
But I do think if you want to play a campaign like this, that's very heavy on dramatic improv, I think it's worth doing a few session zeros, doing some pre-work to... Yes. You can do... Asteria very helpfully directed some improvs before we even had characters, which was a great way to get to know the people we were playing with, because none of us knew each other before, and B, started to let the incense of the campaign vibe start to infuse us, right? The sense of what we were doing and who we could be started to grow from those exercises. So do some pre-work, futz around with some ideas before you dive in to a full campaign, or not. I mean, you can also just start playing and see what happens. But that approach does lend itself more to a sort of funny dicking around style, which is also great. Don't get me wrong.
In our session zeros, kind of as a warm-up, I had us do a collaborative narration exercise, basically, where we each did a line of... We narrated something random, or like I did a sentence of narrating just something I pulled out of my ass and then threw it to someone who then had to, wherever I left off, then had to continue the narration and throw it to someone else. And we each did one line. And in the first session zero, it was totally third person. And I think my first thing was, had a dark and stormy night vibe. Literally, I used to have a thing on the side of my monitor that you can put Post-its on that had owls. And so I said something about owls.
Oh, yeah.
And the second one, I made it a little bit more GM and players. I did it second person, and it was still one sentence each. And the main reason I did that is I knew that what I wanted us to do was scary. What I wanted us to do in this campaign. And that's 4 out of the 5 of us are trained in theatrical performance, and the 5th of us is a podcaster. And part of the mission statement of this is really exploring what DAGGERHEART can do with narrative, finding the DAGGERHEARTiness of the system. Not that you always have to do that with DAGGERHEART, but really pushing that and realizing that it's still very intimidating to go out on a limb and do that. And I wanted to see what I could do with inviting you guys into being storytellers with me.
Yeah.
And it's still, it's still hard. And I was terrified. Yeah, it's just as an icebreaker to try to get us to be cringe and do it wrong and get over that hump. And reminder to anyone listening that a game and a show are not the same thing. And that's a topic for a whole other episode. And it's something I think about a lot, and something that I'm going to be thinking about even more when going into season 2 is, where do we want them to be different? Because we're telling a story not just to each other, but also to an assumed audience, which I think most of us, I think all of us, as we're used to kind of cheating out, if you will. If we were not recording this and it was just for ourselves, I think we would do pretty much what we're doing, the 5 of us, because of who we are. And it's still you got to warm up a little. That's what all that comes down to. You got to remind yourself that you're allowed to do this silly thing. And it's not just about what the dice in your character sheet give you permission to do. It's also what the wonderful people at the table give you permission to do by really wanting you to do it.
Yeah. RPGs are great.
Yeah.
In conclusion, agree 100%. I think regardless of if this were not for public consumption, I think the desire still for it to land, for those moments to just feel totally locked in and dramatic, would still be there.
Yeah.
And I think regardless of what style of game you're drawn to, you're looking for moments where you feel like you've lived richly in a story.
Yeah. And I really love episode 6. I really love There are so many parts of this season where we get to be dance partners and tennis opponents. Yeah, where we get to challenge each other collaboratively and challenge each other a bit more competitively as well.
Mm-hmm.
And it's all part of the fun, because that is part of the mission statement of the whole thing. You know, there's a lot of this we could do without the game part, but we want the game part too.
Yeah.
We want to get one over on each other, let's be honest.
Yeah. Oh, certainly. Yeah. Officially, I'm here to help you tell a beautiful story, but secretly, I'm here to ruin your life.
Well, that would be the most beautiful story of all, Jay Ben. Winning is
winning is the best ending to any story.
Yeah.
Yeah. Another, just maybe as a final note, I spoke in another Duality Bites about this. I had a condition for Lemma to start using his poetry. Originally, condition was see one of his friends get hurt. And as I mentioned then, that never happened at this point. Ginny or Leon got hurt, or I think Katie might have gotten hurt at certain points, but he never witnessed it. He was never there. Once we entered this camp, I was kind of getting tired of that, artificial limitation or lemmitation. and with the appearance of Lorelei, I was like, great. This works. I didn't anticipate this. I didn't plan it, but it does what I want it to. It gets my character where I want him to go. And so it's after this conversation, this interaction, that Lemma starts actually using his poetry in a way totally different than I envisioned, right? I thought it would be like spur of the moment. He wasn't thinking about it. It was desperation. And here it's something much more gentle, where he's like, he unexpectedly comes to terms with part of his past and learns to accept a part of himself. So I think that's a really good example of, I had a sense of like a story beat that I wanted for the character and a slightly rigid sense of how I wanted it to transition. And my game master gave me an unexpected, something that I didn't plan or think of, but gave me a better option, I think.
Which is kind of perfect for Lemma as well, who had very rigid expectations.
Yeah.
And part of this is my reluctance or just disinclination to throw you flat out villains, like villains. Not that they shouldn't exist, but I'm probably going to save them up. I think I gave you a different kind of danger than expected. And I'm realizing I gave you the kind of danger that maybe was most perplexing and infuriating to Lemma specifically, and the Shadowjack camp sets up, actually, a vibe that really needles Lemma later on, which is a bunch of people saying, you're safe here, we're your allies, and Lemma going, that cannot possibly be true. This is not a safe environment.
Yeah.
This is a very blatant example of that I think maybe that feeling sticks with Lemma.
Yeah. Yeah, I think I hadn't made that exact connection, but I think that's right. I think that the psychic damage incurred in this encounter.
Yeah. Because one of my favorite things about Kiva listening back is how she'll just stick with a joke forever, and including the I'm your captive. It's how she just resolved that fight by being like, I surrender, I'm your captive, and immediately talks you into coming to her camp. And she's like, hey, everyone, these are my captors.
Right.
And that just doesn't do anything bad to you. So what are you going to do?
Right. I guess it's fine. Yeah. Yeah. It's funny, actually, as we're talking about it, I think Kiva rubbed off on Lemma a little bit.
Oh, yeah. Please tell me more.
Well, I think after that encounter, he's blunter. And I'm thinking about some of his behavior in the moment that you know what I'm referring to, in that sequence. I think that may have been inflected by those interactions.
Sorry, I'm just smiling, thinking about every time I pissed Lemma off.
Yeah, I think Lemma probably ranks
and
as
vice versa
most frequently irritated PC.
Yeah, and he irritated a lot of. He's irritated a lot of NPCs. We got each other good. Not always when we were trying. thank you for chatting about elegists.
It's
and
an absolute
Shadowjacks
pleasure.
and parents.
And yeah, and improv and the unexpected.
Yes. And I'll talk to you soon.
Looking forward to it, Asteria.
Thank you for listening to Duality Bites, a production of Hag Deal Gaming. If you like what we're doing here, come say hi on Blue Sky or TikTok at Hag Deal Gaming. Leave us a review. We'd love to know what you think. And remember, as a wise person once said, this is not a safe environment.
Yeah.